What is up, you guys? I hope you're all doing well. I'm Tony Fuentes. Welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who I am, in this channel I post tutorials on video and photo editing. So if you're interested in those topics, consider hitting the subscribe button down here so you don't miss any of my videos. Okay, today we're returning to the Edit series, which is a series where we break down the styles of famous YouTubers, famous photographers, famous filmmakers, or even films, and try to replicate or emanate those colors in post-edition so we can further our knowledge in how to analyze and how to edit photos in particular. So the style we're going to break down today is Word. Now this profile is one that you guys suggested in the comment sections down below on a previous video more than a year ago, so it's been on my list for quite a while, but I have a very big list of suggestions from you guys. So be sure to put in the comment sections down below any other suggestion on videos, topics of videos, or even styles that you want me to break down, and I'll get to them slowly but surely, and to break them down if they meet the criteria to add them to the Edit series. Now, how does this series work? First, we're going to jump into Instagram, check out the style, break down how he takes the photographs, how he edits them, and in particular the contrast and color grading. And then we're going to apply all that knowledge from the breakdown into Lightroom to create a base preset, and then we're going to create 3 different styles on this variants on this style. Now I can say we're going to create 4 presets because I already did the Spanish version of this video. So let's not waste any more time and let's jump into Instagram and break down the style, guys. Okay, so here we have Word on Instagram, Word _ if you're gonna go and support him. And this guy is quite anonymous. We don't know his real name. We only have maybe his initials, I don't know. And he doesn't show his face on his profile picture. What we do know is that he's a photographer based in Chicago. Now, scrolling down his style, we can immediately see that it's a very moody and cinematic street photography style, and this is what we're gonna break down. It's very nice style. There's a lot of changes. For example, we have some blue tones, then we have some green tones, then we have some very yellowish tones, but they all have a lot of concepts within them. That's why we're gonna create a base style, and then we're gonna create some variants. Now, before we jump into that, let's talk about gear. Now, he does shoot with Canon. I did find a comment or response to a comment down below in one of his images where he says that he shoots with Canon, but then he doesn't explain much more. He doesn't say with which lens or focal distance he used. Now, I can assume that it's a 24-70. Why? Because of the variety of the shots. First of all, for example, in this one we have a very cropped in shot, but it's not too much that it's a telephoto. It's more of a short telephoto, and indicated by the blurred out image person on the foreground. Now, if you keep scrolling down, then we have some wide shot like this one, which is maybe a 24mm or maybe even a 35, which is quite wide, but still within the range of a 24-70. Now, I'm saying 24-70 in particular because of the bokeh. Now, if we scroll down just a bit to maybe this photo, we can see that the background is blurred out, but not completely blurred out that we don't understand what everything is there, and not everything is creamy. These things that you don't understand what the background is normally happens with a 1.4 or even 1.2 aperture, so it's not a prime lens that he's using. He's using maybe a standard zoom lens which has a maximum aperture of 2.8. That's why they are blurred out, but we can understand that there's a bus over here, that there's a theater over here, and there's 2 people and some cars, so it's not completely blurred out. Now, another thing that really gives it away that it's a 2.8 aperture is the bokeh balls. Now, these bokeh balls, well, they are quite nice. In some cases, in the borders, they are turning into cat eye shapes, which is not ideal, but they're not very big. They're not as small as f4 bokeh balls, but they're not as big as 1.4 bokeh balls. So this isn't even a 1.8. This is a 2.8 size bokeh ball. I know it from experience. Just grab your lens, put it in 2.8 and shoot some bokeh balls, and you see that there's a similar size to them. So my guess is that he shoots with a 24-70 to have that versatility in field, in the street, when you want to capture every single moment and don't skip a beat, so you don't have to waste more time changing lenses. Just zoom in, zoom out whenever you need. That's a great tool for street photography, a standard zoom lens from 2.8 aperture, like a 24-70, let's say. Now, while we're talking about gear, one thing that's very apparent for me is the use of a diffusion filter. Now, let me explain. Over here in the night photography, for example, we can see how there's a halation effect around all the lights. Basically, we're losing a lot of contrast in the lights, and this is basically product of a mist or diffusion filter. Now, I can't understand if it's maybe a 1/8 of mist filter or diffusion effect or a 1/4. It all depends on the intensity and the situation, but over here it's very apparent. Over here we're undercover, so there's no mist, there's no rain to emphasize the effect of the light, but over here we can see how the light is bleeding out into the surroundings, creating this halation effect, which is also called mist or diffusion filter. So he uses it basically in all the photos at night. Again, this train over here, halation effect in every single part which is bright in the image. Now that's it for gear. Now let's talk about when he shoots his photographs. Now his photographs mostly are in moody days. What I mean by that is in an overcast day or a rainy day or a snowy day, and mostly in maybe a blue hour or when the sun is setting where the light is very diffused, or he shoots at night. So we can see lots of images from those types of days and also that time. Another thing that we can see is in rare occasions we can see images like these ones which are shot maybe at sundown or at midday, but he adds a very warm effect and a bit more contrasty style. But mostly he does shoot in rainy days, which is, well, Chicago is mostly like that during most of the year. So that is how he shoots his photographs. Okay, now let's jump into breaking down the color grading, and in particular let's start off with the exposure and contrast. Now what we can see from his images, let's start off with a basic one or a more representative of his style, is this one. For example, we can see that in the shadows we do have a bit more information that we should normally have. This is the shadow of the umbrella, so we don't really normally see a lot of information over here, but there is just a bit more. This is indicating that the shadows, he's bringing them up just a bit, so we have a bit more information in the shadows, and we have a flatter image as well, because the highlights, as we can see over here, they have quite a bit of information. So this is indicating that he's trying to create a flatter image, or expanding the dynamic range of the image by pulling up the shadows and bringing down the highlights, so we have a flatter image with a lot more information that it was shot with. What I just said really replicates here once again. Here we can see a lot of information in the suit of this subject over here, and also we can see a lot of information in the bright parts of the image. So this image is quite flat. So it's not a very extreme S-curve or anything like that in the tone curve. It's just a nice flat curve, so we have a lot of information. Now one thing that we can notice from most of the images is that he adds a blue tint to the shadows. Now over here we can see it. There's a blue tint in the shadows over here, every part which is dark in the image has a bluish tint to it. Now this is done in color grading, but he doesn't do it in all of his images. That's why we're going to create several presets. Now this is going to be one style, and in another style he adds maybe a green tint into the midtones, but there's no blue tone in the shadows. We don't see any blue over here, but we do see a greenish tint in the highlights or in the midtones mostly. So this is another style that we have over here, the greenish tint. This greenish tint replicates over here, and here we have that greenish tint or greenish cast basically added to the midtones, which is mostly most of this image is composed within midtones, and it has that greenish cast. We can see that the highlights don't have that greenish cast at all, and also the shadows, well, they're a bit warm, but they also have a bit of green. But in general, if we scroll down, most of his style is quite flat with a lot of faded out blacks, as we can see. Now this is the black of Instagram over here, which is pure black, and then we can see that the black on the image is basically faded out and washed out. This is done in the tone curve. He's bringing up the black, so we don't have pure blacks on the image. Again, big halation effect over here, product from the mist filter, but also product of the ambient. This one again is with the greenish cast, as we can see, added to the midtones. This set of images is beautiful. Once again, we can see that flat grade in the image. We have a lot of information in the shadows. We have those faded out blacks, just barely faded out, but also we can see that the whites aren't pure whites. This white that we have over here is a bit darker than the interface on Instagram. And then again, we can see that most of the colors are desaturated, with the exception of the blues, the reds or the warm tones, and then we have that bluish cast in the shadows in every part. So this is one of the styles, the most representative style from his feed, this one with bluish cast to it. So up to now we have two styles that we want to replicate from the base style. We have the one with the bluish tones in the shadows with a very flat curve, then we have the one which is a bit more faded out with a lot of greens, and then we have this other one which is a more warmish tone. This one he applies it sometimes in sunny days, and here we have it, this warm cast or orangey cast in the midtones that basically makes the whole image look a bit more sepia. But also notice the desaturation on everything else. The greens are basically gone over here in this building. Then we have it once again over here, and in this one we can see that it's a bit of a mixture of the bluish tint in the shadows and then the yellowish cast in the midtones to make this image a lot more dramatic with color contrast. We can see those blues in the blacks and in the shadows, and then we have those warmish tones in the midtones. So this is a combination of the previous two that we mentioned. Once again, in this one we have that warmish preset that we're talking about, where we have those warmish tones in the midtones, but in this case we don't have that bluish tone in the shadows. Now in this case he adds a bit more contrast. Now the blacks are pure blacks, as we can see, almost pure blacks, and they're a bit more contrasty, and the whites, well, they're very bright. So in this case, he's altering a bit of the tone curve to make the image a lot more contrasty than in the previous edits. Now in this image, we can see basically his style. Everything is completely desaturating, minus the warmish tones. Therefore, the skin tones, this yellow cone over here, and the oranges over here really pop up a lot more. And this is because he's adding them in a bit more saturation in camera calibration, but also in HSL, adding some luminance to them. So basically what we want to do is create a desaturated style, very moody style, raising a bit of the shadows and bringing down a bit of the highlights. We have a lot more information in those parts of the image, fading out the blacks. And then in color grading, we're going to create different variations on this style. We're going to add maybe some bluish tone in the shadows for one preset, then we're going to add some greenish tones in the midtones or some warmish tones to create different variations on his style. Now we could go ahead and create combinations from these styles depending on the situation, like he does, but you can do this once you figure out how to create the variations, and we don't want to make this video 30-40 minutes long. So I think I have everything I need, guys, to replicate his style. I'll walk you through it. Let's jump into Lightroom. But before we jump into Lightroom, guys, I'm just going to tell you that these 4 presets that we're going to create are going to be added into the like preset pack V2. Now the V2 is a new preset pack starting off with these 4 presets, and every single preset that we create in the future in the Edit Like series, the mobile and the desktop versions, are going to be added into this Edit Like preset pack. Now I'm going to differentiate this V2 from the V1. The V1 is going to stop growing right now. It has 47 presets, and it's going to have the desktop and the mobile versions as well. But I'm going to stop growing that one because as the size of presets grow, also the price goes up just a bit, and it's going to get out of hand very soon. So better create another V2 pack where we can start low with the price, and if you buy it right now, you can, well, get a discount basically, because every single preset that we add, you can just update it and download it again. So for those early birds, you can get it at a cheaper price right now than when it will have 40 or 50 presets in the future. So this is just a way that you can support me, guys. And if you wish to skip all these Edit Like tutorials, just a link up here. And if not, let's jump into Lightroom and edit this. Okay guys, once in Lightroom we have these images. As you can see, we have many which are shot at night just to try to replicate his style. A lot of them are in moody days, and some of them, just a bit of them like this one, and also this one and this one, are in more days with a bit more sun to replicate that warmish tint. So first of all, we're going to create the base preset, and then we're going to jump into the variation. So let's start off by selecting maybe this image. Now, first of all, exposure, contrast, and white balancing, I normally don't touch them. I leave them at 0, and I don't include them in the presets. So we can adjust these values to adapt the preset to different photographies and different lighting scenarios. So I normally leave them at 0. Now, what we're going to do is make this image a lot more flat, remember? So first of all, highlights, we're going to pull them down slightly, not too much. We don't want them to be completely gray out like that. We're going to go just a little bit, just around the -10%. At the end, I left it at -9. Then the shadows, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to bring them up, not too much, so the image is completely washed out. As we can see, we have a lot more information at +100, but not too much. We're just going to go up slightly around the +36. So we have just a bit more information in the shadows. As you can see, in these parts, that part of the tunnel, we have a lot more information right now. And also the highlights, well, they're a bit less bloomed out. Now whites, in this case, I'm just going to pull them up just to retain a bit of the contrast in the whites, and in this case blacks, I'm just going to leave it like that because in the tone curve we're going to pull them up just to fade them up just a bit. Now I am going to add a bit of clarity to his style. For that, I'm just going to pull up clarity, not too much, because otherwise everything is too contrasty and we'll lose a lot of information in different parts of the image. Just leave it around the 10%. Just going to leave it at 10, which will make the light or the reflections or the puddles or the water really pop just a little bit more in the night shots in particular. Now let's go down to Vibrance and Saturation. Now saturation and vibrance are quite different, guys. Remember that saturation will basically alters every single color at the same rate. For example, right here at -48, we can see how every color is desaturated. But if we put the vibrance at -48, we can see that some of the colors that are a bit more dominant in the image retain a lot of the saturation. For example, the reds and the oranges and also the yellows retain a lot more saturation. So we're going to use vibrance to be a bit more intelligent with our desaturation. And in this case, we're just going to go to a -13 to make the image a bit more flat in that sense. Further along in HSL, we're going to desaturate most of the colors as well. Next, the tone curve. We're not going to dive deep into the editing in the tone curve in this case. It's just going to be a simple S shape. But if you want an in-depth tutorial for the tone curve to understand it and dominate all the RGB channels, just check it up here in the cards, and I have a complete guide on how to edit with this tool. Now we're going to create a point in the shadows and also a point in the highlights over here. Shadows, we're going to pull them down just below the diagonal, not too much, to make the image a bit more contrasty. And now the blacks, we're going to raise them. We don't want to raise them too much so the image is completely gray. We're going to raise them just ever slightly. The output is going to be around 8, which is the how to measure from the lowest point to up here. It's just going to be 8 to make the blacks just faded out ever so slightly. As you can see now, they're a bit more grayish. This is just what we were looking for. In certain styles or certain presets that we're going to replicate, we're going to bring up this faded look effect just a bit more, particularly in the green effect or green variation on this preset. Next, we can go to HSL, and here we can basically alter the hue, the saturation, and the luminance of individual colors. Okay, so first of all, in hue, I want to make the oranges and the yellows a bit more similar to each other and make them pop a lot more. So therefore, the reds, we're going to pull them towards the oranges. As you can see how this red sign starts to alter. If we pull them up and down, we're going to move them not towards the purples or the magentas, we're going to move them towards the oranges, something around those lines, or plus 30. Then the oranges as well, we don't want them towards the yellowish, we want them towards the oranges once again, or deeper oranges, just around the minus 15, minus 16. Then yellows, we don't want them towards the greens. Now yellows mostly control a lot of the greens in my cameras, in particular in Sony cameras. I don't know in other brands, but in Sony cameras, a lot of the greens that I shoot are in the yellow tab. So in this case, we don't want them towards the greens, we want them to a more muted orangey color. So we're gonna go down around the minus 30s. Greens, in this case, I'm going to leave them at 0. In most of the image that I saw that he implies or he takes photos of something green that are completely desaturated. So in this case, just going to leave it at 0. There's no point in moving the hue if we're going to desaturate it completely. Then aquas and blues, go pull them down. Aquas around to the greens. And also the blues going to pull them down just a bit. Now next, we're going to go to saturation, and here we're going to desaturate most of the colors really. For example, the reds, we want them to pull them down just a bit, around the minus 60. In this case, we want to desaturate most of the image to make it a lot more flat. And then in color grading, we're going to add all those tints into the shadows or midtones. Then oranges, we're going to saturate them just a bit more to make them really stand out from the image. So in this case, going to pull them up, as well as the yellows, we're going to pull them up just as well. And immediately we can see as we move the slider up and down, how this band in the ground really starts to really desaturate and really start to pop a lot more. We don't want to go all the way down to plus 100 because that will create different scenarios depending on the image. Just a plus 58, something like that, to make it really stand out or start to stand out, as well as the sign over here. So we're just playing around with the oranges and yellows, the warm tones, making them stand out. Then saturation on the greens, remember we're going to desaturate them almost completely, almost to the minus 85, just to make them really disappear. Then aquas as well, desaturate them just a bit, as well as the blues around the minus 45s. And then purples and magentas. Well, magentas, I'm not going to move them because sometimes the skin tones contain a lot of magentas, but I am going to desaturate the purples because we don't see them at all in his images. Just going to pull them all the way down to a minus 85 once again. And then we're going to go to the luminance tab, and here the only thing that I want to do is really make the oranges and the yellows pop a lot more. So for that, just going to pull the luminance up. As we can see, it really affects the warm tones when I pull them up. So I don't want to go to the extreme, just around the plus 9%. And a plus 14 or something, or plus 15 in the yellows. Now with Y on our keyboard, we can see what we're doing, and as we can see, the image is a lot more desaturated, a lot more flat, but we are making emphasis in particular in the warmish tones. Now the blues in the sign have basically been muted, which is something that we like, and the image is looking quite nice, guys. And now one thing that we're missing to make those oranges really pop and this bluish pop, we're going to go all the way down to camera calibration. And in camera calibration, what we're going to do is just add some red primary. Now, if you don't know what the camera calibration tool does, just check out my video. I already made 2 videos about them. The second one I think is the best one, where I explain, link up here in the cards. And there you can learn everything that you need to know about camera calibration, because for me it's the most powerful tool within Lightroom. So we're going to add a bit more vibrance into the oranges, make them pop a lot more. So we're going to go with the positives with the red. We don't want to go to the purples. As we can see how the blue, how everything turns to magentas. We want to go up, not to this extreme, but just go up slightly. Then just add a bit of saturation, not too much, just add it a bit, just very subtle. And also to make the warm tones really stand out, we're going to move the bluish tones towards the negative. Now you may be wondering why the hell would the oranges stand out if you're moving the blue slider. It's because they're direct opposites in the color wheel. Now if you reduce one, the other will thrive. So this is basically color contrast or complementary colors and how they work within Lightroom. So in this case, it's going to move the blue primary towards the negatives, and as we can see, towards the negatives everything turns a bit more orange. towards the positive, everything a bit more yellowish. So we're gonna go towards the negatives, and then we're gonna pull the saturation up, not too much. As we can see, that really affects the blues, but also the yellows and the oranges. Just gonna pull it up around the plus 25, something like that. Now we can click this button on off to see what it's done. It's a very subtle change, guys, but it's for the warmish tones in particular, how they change. There you can see them flicker, and also in the reds and oranges, just see them flicker. Just a very subtle touch. Now right here, this is the base preset and it's complete, guys. So we're gonna save it. For that, we're gonna go to the left panel over here, hit the plus sign, create preset, and here we can name it. And remember, we don't want to mark, we want to unmark exposure, contrast, and white balance. These are the tools that are gonna help us adapt the preset to different photographs. So we're gonna leave them unmarked and hit create. Okay, now that we have the base of the preset, let's create a variation before we test it out on different photographs. So in this case, first of all, let's create the bluish tint, which is the most common one on his feed, on the shadow. So for that, we're gonna go to color grading, and this tool I've already made a tutorial about color grading. I'll link it up here in the cards if you want to really dominate this tool. But in essence, we can add a tint to the shadows, to the midtones, and to the highlights. So in this case, we don't want to add anything to the midtones or to the highlights. We're gonna add a tone, a bluish tone, to the shadow. So not going to go to the extreme. Let's just select the color over here, something around these lines. I'm going to go with a hue of 233, and the saturation, don't want to go too high. I'm just going to leave it very subtle, around maybe around the 16%. Now we click Y, we can see that we have that bluish tint in the shadows now, which is very nice. It's not too harsh. If you want it to be a bit more harsh, you can always just amp up a bit of the saturation, but in this case I'm going to leave it like that at plus 16, or you can always make the entire image a lot more blue with reducing the temperature. But in this case, I'm going to leave it like that, and it's looking actually very nice. Now I'm going to save this preset right here. I'm just going to hit the plus sign once again, create preset, and I'm going to name it. In this case, I'm going to name it, and then again, don't mark these three values. I'm going to hit create. Now let's see how this blue preset performs in other images. So for example, we have this image of the Shinkansen. Let's apply first of all the base preset. As you can see, it's made the image a lot more flat than the original. We have those faded out blacks, and we have a bit more information in the shadows and in the highlights with that very nice contrast that he has. Now let's apply the blue one, and as you can see, the image has a lot more blue in general in the entire image. We can always just add a bit more saturation if we believe it's too little, but it's really creating this nice color contrast between the yellows and the oranges that we make them really stand out in HSL and also in camera calibration, and it's just creating this color contrast with the rest of the image, which is largely blue, which is quite nice actually, guys. So that's one variation on his style. Now another variation is the greenish cast that he has, and this greenish cast, remember that it had a bit more of faded out look. So what we're gonna do in this case is first of all reduce the shadows all the way to the zeros. We don't want any blue cast. What we want to do is bring up a bit of the blacks to make them a lot more grayish and a lot more faded out, and the shadows, we don't want them to be too high, just to bring a lot more information in the shadows to make the image a lot more flat, just like that, something like that around these lines. As you can see, this image is very flat compared to the original, which had a lot more contrast. And now what we want to do is just add that greenish cast. Now we're not going to add it in the shadows. In this case, we're going to add it into the midtone. So let's pull up the saturation and just play around with the colors until we have one that we like. In this case, I think this one is a very nice green, around 102, but the saturation is a bit too much, so just gonna reduce it. Yeah, something like that. Now we can click this button on off to see what it's done. Just adding that greenish cast to everything. We can see it in the highlights, in the shadows, but also mainly in the midtone. So let's save this preset and see how it performs in another image. Once again, create it and save it. This one is going to be called green. And for example, we have this portrait of this man over here. Again, I would have to crop and really edit this image a bit more to make it really work. But let's see how these two presets that we've created have performed. Here we have the base preset, and it's looking quite nice compared to the original. Less contrast, and it's looking very beautiful. Then the blue one, yeah, the blue one has this bluish tint to it. It doesn't work quite as well in this image. But then let's apply the green one. And there we have it, a very greenish tint, a lot more of a flat style with a lot more information in the shadows. And I think we really achieved this preset in particular. And next, the preset that we're missing is the golden one, or the more yellowish one. So in this case, we have this image of the Shinkansen, or this speed train. In this case, we have the light beaming down, which is a very nice day. So this one will work perfectly with the warmish tone. So let's apply the base preset. And from the base preset, immediately we can see how we have a lot more information in the image. Now in the midtones, what we're going to do is add that warmish tint to it. So add some saturation and then play around. And in this case, let's just select a more orangey tone, something like that. And the saturation not too high, maybe around the 60 or 63 in this case. And immediately we can see how this image is a lot more like his photos. Now for his warmish preset, he has a lot more contrast. So what we want to do is return the blacks all the way down to pure blacks. Now they're pure blacks. And then we can add a bit more contrast by pulling down the shadows just a bit below the diagonal and pulling up the highlights just a bit over the diagonal to make this image a lot more contrasty. And as you can see how it really makes the image really stand out, and it's just fantastic. So we're going to save this one and see how it performs in other image. Once again, created. Okay, so we have the 4 presets. Now let's see how they perform briefly in other images. Now here we have this image, which is will work perfectly with the warmish preset. So just for the fun of it, let's go through the word one. This is the base one, making the image a lot more flat. Then the blue one with this bluish cast. Then we have the golden one, and there it is. It looks beautiful. Look how the brown of the original jacket, the beige jacket, turns into a bit more of an orangey, vivid one. Very nice. The shadows are a lot more, instead of greenish that we had in the original image, now they're a lot more warm and orangey. And then here we have the green one, which doesn't quite work in this image, but it's quite nice to see the effects. Then for example, we have this image that I've edited so many times in my tutorials, but I really like it. So let's apply first of all the base preset. Then we can apply the blue one, and as you can see, you have that bluish cast to the entire image, which is very nice. Golden one, a lot more contrasty and punchy. It doesn't quite work for these images. It works more for sunny days or golden hour sunsets. Then we have the green one, which is a lot more faded out. How about this portrait? This one is a bit underexposed, so let's apply the preset. And then here is where the values of exposure and contrast, as you can see, they're at 0. Here we can pull up the exposure just to see what we're working with. This is the blue preset, looking very nice, how we desaturate everything minus the blues and the warm tones. Then we have the golden. Yeah, it looks quite nice how it's painting every white part of the image golden. And then we have the green one. There we have it, guys. Finally, let's check it out in the Shinkansen one. Let's see the original. This is the original. Then we have the word preset. As we can see, those changes where it makes the yellows really pop a lot more, reducing a lot of the greens that they had originally. Then we have the blue one, looking fantastic over here. Golden, a bit more dramatic and contrasty. And then we have the green one over here. So guys, I think we achieved the tones quite nicely. Remember, this is just my interpretation on words color gradings. This is just the way I would color grade these types of looks. And I think we did a very nice job. Hopefully you guys understood the process of breaking down the style step by step and how to apply every single one of those steps in color grading in post-edition. Now remember that this preset is going to be added into the Edit Like Preset Pack V2 in case you want to support me and check these presets out and all the future presets that we add. There's also the V1 and all my personal presets on my shop. I'll link it up here in the cards. If you want to support me in that manner, I'd be very thankful. Just a way that I can continue to do this and continue to pump up content for you guys, and hopefully we can all learn in the process. But in exchange, you get some very nice presets that I use every single day. So I digress, guys. I'm raveling. It's quite late in the night, so I'm gonna end the video right now. Just like the video if you made it this far. Comment down below anything that you want, and also share it with a friend. That really helps me out to help this channel grow. It's quite small compared to the Spanish one. So that's gonna be it for today, guys. I hope you're all doing well. Cheers to all of you. See you in there.